The many unique tank designs from around the world can often be fascinating just from an engineering or mechanical perspective, from vehicles designed with one specific role in mind to others intended to perform several roles on the battlefield. The concepts used by various militaries are a great showcase of human ingenuity. However, something I find often even more interesting are the stories behind these designs and the reasons why they were built. Today, we will look at one example of a tank which, despite not being a long-lasting success, has one of the most spectacular stories you've probably never heard. Join me as we discuss the history behind the ARL-44, the French tank secretly designed under Nazi occupation. The story of the ARL-44 is one of a design created under occupation. But what if France had never fallen? Well, thanks to today's sponsor, Call of War, you can try your hand at a wide variety of different alternate history scenarios by taking control of real-world nations during the Second World War. Through your leadership, you can command a variety of units including tanks, ships, planes, and even secret weapons in battles against up to 100 other players in real-time campaigns, which can last several weeks. I've been really getting into strategy games myself lately, and there's nothing more satisfying than watching your carefully planned attacks work successfully to defeat your enemies or support your allies. Download the game today using the link below to play on both PC and mobile devices and get a special starter pack with 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription just for being one of my viewers. This offer is only available for 30 days, so be sure to download now so you don't miss out. Thanks to them for supporting my content. Now let's get back into our main topic. The year is 1940, and Germany has just marched into Paris, securing the surrender of France. Along with being forced under authoritarian rule, the French will also lose much of their military industry, with the Germans quickly seizing factories for their own needs. Under these circumstances, one might assume this would mean the end of French tank development. However, that assumption would be wrong. Though it did greatly hinder these efforts, some of the industry remained within the free zone for over 2 years after the initial invasion, and French military engineers within both the occupied and free zones continued work on existing projects or started new ones in anticipation of a potential liberation or potential export to the occupiers. For example, the Free Zone contained the Forges Chantiers de la Méditerranée, or FCM for short, a company which had previous experience in the development and production of Char 2C, B1, and FCM-36 tanks. Both FCM and a joint team of engineers from the APX and ARL state-owned establishments, along with the Samua company, would attempt to develop new tanks on the basis of one of the most modern French tank designs of the time, the Samua S40. FCM would work on these officially to supply tanks to the Axis, while the engineers from the other companies completed their work in secret in the hopes of having a design ready for when France was again free. The latter project would develop into the SARL-42, a design evolved from the S40, which itself was a continuation of the S35, creating an improved vehicle with a redesigned hull, 3-man turret, and more powerful gun. While the story of that project is far too long to cover in this video and deserves a video of its own, these designs not only showed the appetite of the French to continue developing their own tanks, but would also set the stage for later designs. Another project, though, would prove to be even more influential in the development of the ARL-44, known as the Char B40. This is the part of the story when the underhanded tactics of the French resistance truly begin to reveal themselves. From the Char B40, which was a continuation of the Char B1 Terre, the French continued development in secret, slowly shaping the 40-ton concept into a new 30-ton battle tank. While this conceptual engineering work was crucial to a future production vehicle, due to the aforementioned lack of access to manufacturing facilities, creating and learning from prototype vehicles was impossible. Or was it? Though the French could not simply walk into a factory and begin working on a complete tank, What if the Germans didn't know the thing being tested was contributing to tank development? This was exactly what they would do, secretly testing different parts of their designs under the guise of various civilian equipment. Testing of transmissions and gearboxes was done using a locomotive along with an engine which was never finished. Funnily enough, the running gear and suspension were tested using tractors, incredibly ironic given the Germans themselves had secretly built up their interwar army by claiming their own tanks were just tractors. This is made even more comical when you consider this tractor was developed as a snowblower for the Germans. Despite all that was learned from these undercover developments, though, work would pause following the German occupation enveloping the rest of France in 1942. This would resume again when the Allies made their landings in Normandy and finally freed the nation 2 years later in 1944. Now once more able to openly develop and produce tanks of their own, the French quickly set to work on what would become known as the Château de Transition Atelier de Construction de Roues, or Transition Tank ARL-44, with some hefty goals for 500 tanks equipped with a 75mm gun in a turret produced by Atelier et Châtillon de la Loue at Saint-Denis, or ACL. However, this was later reduced to 200 and then again to 50, although in reality this would only result in a single of the ACL turreted ARLs being completed. This first version, as you see on screen now, was very different from the final ARL-44, but already clearly showcases the vehicle's heritage. The tracks and running gear visually are nearly identical to its ancestor, the Char B1, and the 75mm gun SA-44 it featured began life as part of the SARL-42 project. As you likely saw from the thumbnail of this video though, this was effectively a prototype for the final design. This is not surprising, as by the time this was completed in 1946, the 75mm gun was far behind in terms of performance compared to guns from other nations. With only 60mm of frontal armor on the hull and 100mm on the turret, it also lacked sufficient protection to withstand those weapons. So while this first ARL-44, sometimes referenced as the ARL-44 ACL-1 due to the early turret, was certainly impressive given the context surrounding its development, it was already horribly outdated. These problems were known about long before the 75mm ARL was even completed though, and a new design had been under development since 1944. This would result in a second ARL-44 and would go on to become the design which entered production. In order to accommodate these changes, both the turret and hull would require alterations. As the most significant of these were for the turret, we'll start with the hull. Visually, the hull remained nearly identical to the previous design, but featured increased armor protection going from 60mm on the front to 120mm sloped at 42 degrees, just 30mm less than the German Tiger II. The other armor was far less thick though, with the lower plate remaining only 50mm with the side and rear armor varying from 40 to 60mm and only 20mm for the deck and belly plates. This increase in armor did come at a cost though, with the total vehicle weight now sitting at 48 tons, significantly more than the 35-ton tank ordered in October of 1944. Due to this and reliability problems, the suspension was altered, going from a hydropneumatic system planned for the Char B40 to a more traditional coil spring type derived from the B1 Ter. The power plant for this new tank would also change, no longer utilizing the planned 500 horsepower Talbot engine in favor of the German HL-230. As hull production had already started prior to several of these changes, some of the early production hulls would be retrofitted with the improvements. As I alluded to earlier, the real changes to this design become apparent when we look at the turret, which was entirely different from the 75mm design. Initially a more powerful 75mm with ballistics similar to the Panther's gun based on a 90mm AA gun was considered, but this was pushed aside in favor of a larger 90mm. This came in the form of the massive 90mm SA-MLE 1945S cannon with a length of just under 6 meters, capable of reaching 1,000 meters per second muzzle velocity. The turret itself was far larger, now being designed by Schneider and featuring 110mm of armor on the front. However, similar to the hull, the sides and rear were much thinner at only 30mm and only 10mm for the roof. As for the shape of the turret, it was based on some pre-war designs, with perhaps some influence from the German designs, as the final product looks fairly similar to that of the Tiger II. When combined with the shape of the hull, I think it is no exaggeration to call this tank the French King Tiger. A few other interesting facts worth noting regarding the design of this tank are that during travel, the gun would be partially retracted backwards into the turret. This was to prevent damage to the turret or turret mechanisms, as the long barrel caused the center of mass to be shifted forward from the optimal balance point. The tank also featured a door on the side which the crew would use to enter and exit the vehicle, with this being one of the last instances of this on a battle tank. A wooden mock-up of this finalized ARL-44 would be completed in mid-1945, just after the end of the war. As for production of the vehicles, it closely followed that of the 75mm armed ARLs, with an initial order of 300 tanks with the 90mm, which was later reduced to 150 on June 3, 1945, and reduced again to only 60 in 1946. 20 of these were built by Renault, with the other 40 built by a company called Compagnie des Forges Aciers de la Marine de Haut, or FAMH, who had many years prior built one of France's first tanks, the Saint-Chamond, as well as the Char B1 bis. Delays in production, largely due to issues with completion of the turrets, led to the first ARL-44s not reaching service until 1951, finally being seen by the public in June of that year during a parade in Paris. By this point, the ARL-44 had already been demoted from heavy tank to the rank of tank destroyer due to the fact that despite the powerful gun, its slow speed and lack of any substantial armor aside from the frontal plate would make it insufficient in a heavy tank role. The rest of the ARL-44's brief service life was similarly disappointing, as it proved to be mechanically unreliable and an outdated design. Due to this, the ARL-44 only remained in service for about 1 year before being pulled from service. However, it is in some ways unfair to criticize the tank for this lackluster service. Yes, it was an outdated design built using elements taken from several pre-war vehicles. Yes, production and development was so slow that by the time it reached service, it was over half a decade after its intended introduction. And yes, when it finally did reach service, it was a mechanical mess. But at the end of the day, the ARL-44 still did exactly what it was intended to do: serve as a transitional tank, bringing its nation from the fall of France into the post-war world with its tank-building industry somewhat intact. For that, I for one think the ARL-44 is a perfect example of a vehicle cursed by its own design while also succeeding in its primary goal. Thankfully, a handful of these tanks remain today, preserving this forgotten link in the history of French armor. But what do you think about this unique example of French engineering? Let me know down in the comments, and while you're down there, be sure to download Call of War to get that special sign-up bonus for the next 30 days. I also want to give a huge thanks to Alain Vital for their help with both translations and source material for this video, as well as Marisa Belhote, who has a work-in-progress article for Tanks Encyclopedia I was able to get access to, as well as several other already published articles on their site. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank Colasix, who is responsible for many of the documents you saw on screen during this video, which come directly from the French archives. Be sure to show your appreciation for all of them down in the comments, as without them, this video would likely not have been possible. As always, thank you all for watching, and to my ConelyFans who continue to throw money at me to talk about tanks. I truly appreciate all of you. If you enjoyed this video, I recommend checking out my previous episodes on either the German modifications of the FCM36 or the Romanian modification of the R35. Hope to see you there or on my next video.